Welcome to Come and See, your podcast for finding truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. With host and founder Richard Case and co-host and retreat leader Kathy Ricconi. Today is our special guest day, where we will hear from a friend of the ministry who will share their insight and stories on truth in this chaotic world. And now your host, Richard Case.
Well, welcome everybody. This is Guest Thursday. This is actually our guests that are wrapping up our Discerning God's Will whole program, which we, Kathy, do you realize we've done about 45 of those?
I was going to say it's a lot. We've been on this one for a long time, but it's been great discussions.
Yeah. And so Joel and Christina, they're our good friends. They're Living Waters leaders and also C12 leaders from San Antonio, Texas. So
morning.
We're happy to have you guys. How's the weather down there?
Hot.
It's humid. It's humid.
We got a little cold snap a week or so ago, and everybody was excited. Yay, fall's here!
Yeah.
And then, but like typical South Texas, we went right back to hot for a while. So,
my son and his family, they moved to Dallas, but they went down to Austin last weekend for the Formula One races.
Oh, fun!
So it was pretty cool, and they said there were something like 250,000 people. They go to it. It's like unbelievable, crazy. And Cher, our daughter-in-law, sent us a picture. This is funny, of the new Tesla factory, and she said she said they drove by it at 80 miles an hour on the freeway, and it took them a minute to go from one end to the other. So tell you how big that is.
Yeah.
In Austin, Texas. So it's amazing. So we're happy to have you guys, and we're excited. We've enjoyed you, being part of the leadership team, and very, very active in giving it away, Kathy, with retreats and giving it away. So we're really excited to learn more about you. So if you would start to help our audience learn a little bit about you, how did you each come to know Christ in your life? Mine's
actually a really exciting testimony. I don't recall ever not knowing God. So, grew up in my mom's side, everybody was in the ministry. And so I made a decision for Christ really before I can remember. The first thing I do remember is at 7 years old, I asked if I could be water baptized, spoke with the pastor of the church we were attending, and he said, well, that's fine, and took me back to his office, left my parents out in the sanctuary, and interviewed me to see if I knew what I was really doing. And I guess I convinced him, because he let me get baptized. So that's kind of the start of my Christian walk.
Wow, that's cool.
Cool. And I was raised a Jehovah's Witness, and we lived in California, and we moved to Texas, and my mom and dad started challenging the Jehovah's Witness belief and the religion. And so we got kind of excommunicated, and that kind of left us drifting. And my aunt is a prayer warrior. She prayed us. We were living nearby her. So anyway, I went to church. I didn't go to church for the right reasons. I went to church because the football team was there, and I was sitting in the back row, and I was like, my whole reason for me and my friend to be there was not because of God.
Was that in San?
God will be creative, though.
Was that in San Antonio?
No, sir. It was in Bullard, Texas, a little cow town outside Tyler.
Okay, Tyler.
And I went to a little Baptist church, and so as I'm sitting there, the pastor's talking about salvation or being saved. I looked at my friend. I said, "What's saved from what?" And she's like, "I don't know." And so that was helpful. And so I stopped the pastor after church and asked him like a little bit more about that. And so he, greeted everybody out of the church, and then he sat on the front porch with me and led me to the Lord that day. And so that was just the journey of the beginning of how that happened.
Wow. And how old were you then?
15.
15.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And so then did you go back and share that with your parents at that point? Because they were still seeking, or
Yes.
what were they?
Yeah.
Where were they at in this journey?
They were seeking, and they were kind of in limbo, and my mom was still kind of apprehensive because she had really strived and was accepted into the Jehovah's Witness community. And so, but my dad was questioning everything. So he started doing research himself, and he too became saved right before he passed. And so that was just a God moment too. So so together we started celebrating our first Christmas together, celebrating Christmases and birthdays, because we had never done that before.
Wow.
Oh, that's beautiful.
By the way, we're in the middle of this series on discovering God's will. One of the fundamental differences between following Christ and every other, which is all, by the way, religion, is what you just shared, is that God says, and this is why we labeled our podcast "Come and See," is, well, come and process and move to the truth and see. God, with his love, invites us to that. Said, yeah, sure. You got questions, you got challenges, you're not sure what it means. Let's go find out. Almost every other religion, like you said, you experienced, once you challenge it, they actually shun you.
Yes.
Because why? Well, we need you to follow our beliefs as opposed to the relationship. So that's it's a great reminder of all of us of the beauty of the love of God, and the Christianity is, well, no, that's great that you challenge. It's healthy. Come on, let's go process, find out.
Yeah.
So now you're in Texas, and how did you two then meet when you first got together?
So since I was a new Christian, I started listening to more Christian music, and on the radio, there was an advertisement saying there's this man coming to this church in Tyler, Texas, talking about the expose of Jehovah's Witnesses. He was one, and now he's Christian, and he was going to tell more about, the difference between religion and their beliefs and walking with the Lord. So it was very drawn to it. So I came to the church in Tyler and listened through his lesson and just learned a lot. And afterwards, a handsome young man came and introduced himself. Little did I know that he was the president of the youth group and was welcoming all the people to the church.
That was my job.
It was his job.
So you
find out the pretty young ladies and welcome them.
So Joel,
and the guys too. I would recognize both.
So Joel, you were at a different church in that town? Okay.
Yeah, I was. So Bullard was probably 30 minutes out in the country. Yeah. And I was in Tyler proper. And so I had been at that church for a short while, had been asked to be the president or leader of our youth group. We had a youth pastor, but he wanted a youth member and so we formed a little youth council. Okay. And I was the president of the group. And so part of my job was to meet all the new youth,
all the new people,
and invite them to youth. And so that was August 25th, 1985, about 7 p.m. in the evenings when
Oh,
you remember that date, right?
You made an impression, Christina.
I guess so. Yeah.
Now, how old were both of you then?
17.
So you were in high school on the way to college.
I had.
I was in high school, and you were on.
I just finished. Yeah, I just finished.
He graduated early. He's excels.
And was starting college.
Wow. Isn't Tyler the rose capital of?
It is.
Yeah.
Which is great when you're dating, because roses are $1 a dozen. So I get back then. Now they're $2 or $3 a dozen. But
Joel, he would bring 3 roses instead of 2.
Exactly.
Hey, look at this.
Yeah, so, she had plenty of roses when we were dating. Yeah. It was great.
Okay, so you do you begin dating after you meet pretty quickly? How did that work?
No, we were friends probably for 6 months. So I of course invited her to youth, and her cousin had come with her, and so they started coming to youth, and I started inviting them to be part of various projects we were working on, and we had a really active youth group. We were probably doing stuff 5 nights a week.
We were very busy.
Oh wow.
We would host concerts,
and so our youth pastor, put on concerts. He was what do you call a guy that puts those together? But anyway. So he brought a lot of concerts to town, and we'd help run those. And so the group was really active. We spent a lot of time together and did a lot of things together. And so we just became good friends over the next probably 6 months or so. And then February 14th, that next year, I asked her to the youth banquet on Valentine's Day. And that was our first official date.
That was our first official date. Yeah.
Yeah. And what, what attracted you to each other? What was attractive about you wanting to start dating?
Well, I'm not sure, to be honest, because in the beginning,
She's
I-
still
I-
wondering that question.
Because you may have heard me share this story. There was many times that he's a great friend, but he was a very leadership, take charge kind of guy. And I'm a very free spirited, and I'm not one to be told what to do too often and feel okay with it. So as a group, for us to say, hey, let's all go here and let's go there, that's fine. But at the same time, so I actually remember being in a service. We had a youth rally, and where we brought a bunch of youth groups around, and we're standing there. We were praying for the city, praying for youth, and we're praying. I had my eyes closed, and I heard I think the first time the Lord saying, when you open your eyes and you look, you'll see your husband. And sure enough, I opened my eyes, and there Joel stands, and I was like, no.
Can I try again?
Let's try again. No, wait.
Two out of three.
Pretty much.
She's wanting to spin around. That's it.
Rotate a little bit. So
Right.
anyway, it's not that he wasn't a great person. It's just he was very take charge kind of person. But anyway, I guess the Lord kind of softened my heart about that, and we started still dating, and it just happened. So.
Yeah.
One of the things that attracted me to Christina was she was sold out for God. Even at 17, you could tell she was all in. And for that age, that's rare, regardless of what dispensation you grew up in. And certainly in the 80s, that was a rare thing. And she also had a great work ethic. One of the things her parents had done well was really involved her in their small business. And so she didn't whine about anything. She was all, would jump in the middle of a project and work till it got done. And so, and she was a ton of fun. I mean, I was not fun. I didn't spend money, and so, like they said, opposites attract, and she was very much my opposite, more so then than now, as we've spent almost 35 years together. This next year.
Oh, wow.
We've rubbed some edges off, and
Beautiful.
but those were the things that initially attracted me to it.
Yeah. And then how long did you date before you got married?
Almost 2 years. We got married a month shy of 2 years of knowing each other.
Yeah.
Okay. So you were in college then, right?
I had just wrapped up my first degree
Yeah.
in electronics engineering, and we were 19, and I had thought about going on with my degree program, but she was I felt like I was ready to get married. She felt like she was ready to get married. The whole world was against us. My parents said she was old enough, but I wasn't.
Yeah.
And so
he didn't have a lot to contend to as far as my family. My dad had already been killed in an accident, and my mom was like, sure, just take her. But she wanted stability for me too, because she knew I was kind of wandering around. And so it didn't take long. God had softened my heart a bunch, and love grew. And so we got married not long after.
Beautiful.
2 years.
Yeah. And here you are, 35 years married. That's been fantastic.
Yeah, we knew we weren't, in some ways we weren't ready, but we knew we wanted to tackle life together. And so we said, let's do it. And
nice.
God's blessed us.
Yeah. Well, tell us what you're doing now. How did you wind up at C12? And then Christina's involved in real estate. So share with us how you came to that.
So I've had 3 major career paths in life. Got out of college, went to work for a Fortune 500 company in the high-tech electronics sector, and got to do a lot of cool things and really climb the corporate ladder. And that was a lot of fun. Then during that process, we helped plant a church here in San Antonio. Our pastor's originally from South Africa, and they'd been called to the U.S. to plant a church here. And we teamed up with them, and about 90 days into it, I left Fortune 500, starting consulting practice, was really blessed in that regard, making a nice income. And so about 90 days into this church launch, the senior pastor calls, and at that time he had about 250 churches around the world he had helped start or plant. And he said, would you come on my team? And so that started that process of where ultimately a couple of years later, I left my consulting practice and went to work for the church full-time, the ministry full-time. But during that 2 years, the Lord had blessed me income-wise. So I was able to work 20 to 40 hours a week volunteering for the church in a kind of an executive pastor or administrator role. And then work 20 to 40 hours a week consulting and still take good care of my family. So did that. Eventually, I did go full-time into the ministry, onto the ministry team as the administrator, helping with the church plants around the U.S. and traveling internationally.
So not just in one local body, but you were actually working to plant other churches as well.
Yeah.
Very
So
cool.
mostly from the admin side of things, helping the new churches get off the ground in that regard. And then eventually we were asked and felt led to pursue ordination, which we did. And toward the end of that ordination process, just really, and it's a long story, and we could talk for an hour just on that story, but we both felt called. One Sunday morning, the pastor was preaching a message on penetrating the cosmos, the Greek word with a K, cosmos, which is the marketplace or the world system. And we really felt during that sermon, it dropped in both our hearts to go back into the marketplace and somehow mix business and faith. And really had no clue how that would happen. And Christina made the comment, she goes, well, maybe you're supposed to be some sort of marketplace evangelist, but with like an emphasis on business. And we didn't know quite how to put the language around it. That was at the end of 2010. So we continued pursuing ordination, eventually planted a church of our own. And then the beginning of 2015, we really felt that desire rise back up in us to get back out into the marketplace with our faith. And we were open to it, like you talk about, in abiding and kind of just paying attention and gathering facts and looking at data and felt like I needed to go ahead and resign my position at the church because we knew that was going to be a multi-month deal, and had a sense I was going to go back into some sort of consulting. And in that process, just heard about C12, and it was actually C12, longtime C12 member told me about it and said, you'd be the perfect candidate. And as I left his office, he emailed Mike Sharrow and Robert Vogel, two key people in C12, to make the introduction. And a month later, we met up. But as I left his office, I called Christina and she said, so is he going to help you with a consulting contract? Because that's kind of the direction I thought I was supposed to go. And I said, no, but remember that penetrating the cosmos message back in 2010. And she said, yeah. I said, we're supposed to go back in the marketplace that somehow mix our faith and business. And she said, yes. I said, it's called C12. I know what we're doing next.
Wow. Oh, I love that story.
That's great. And what, you're now a regional chair. How many groups do you have? And do you have any sub-chairs?
I have two CEO groups and a key player group. And I am technically an associate chair under, we're one of the largest, if not the largest geographical territory in all of C12.
Yeah.
And so Robert Vogel actually oversees all of from north of Austin to south, east and west of San Antonio. Yeah. And so I work on his team. But like I said, I have a couple of CEO groups and what we call a key player group, which is really that number two, if something happened to the CEO who would step in and take over.
Oh, great.
So God's been blessing it. This year's been extremely fruitful. Last year was a little dry for me personally, from a productivity or results point of view, but this year's been amazing. I just really buckled down, and that also there was some abiding involved in that.
Right.
And
yeah.
God led me to some ideas that are working.
Yeah, we'll share about that. And then Christina, I know you're involved in kind of you get your real estate license.
She's
right?
involved in everything. Yeah.
I'm jack of all trades, to be honest. I'm a real estate agent. The Lord has helped me become a real estate agent, so that's going well. I'm also a marketplace chaplain. I go into corporations, into the marketplace, and those companies that have hired for chaplains to come in and be a perk for their employees. If a lot of people don't go to church, and so they just need that point of contact if they have run into a death in the family, they're not handling COVID well, they're not handling life in general. So that's where we step in as chaplains. And then I just recently started a cleaning service, which is an abiding testimony that I'll share in a little bit, but it's all good. So that's where I'm at right now. So everything's going great.
That's great. Well, that's quite exciting, and I know you're both very active and need abiding and need discerning God's will just for margin, you know.
This is true.
Yeah. So talk to us about that a little bit in terms of how do you personally abide? What does that look like to you? And then secondly is what difference has that made in your life? And then we'll transition a little bit into and you can pull these together, discerning God's will, which obviously includes abiding, but going to unity. So maybe you could share that and give us, like you said, maybe some examples of that.
Yeah. So the process for me really is just that morning quiet time. And I've grown up in church, and I've heard people say, well, you can abide anytime, you can have quiet time anytime. You can spend time with God driving down the road. True. You can spend time with God, breaking off a minute or two at the office. True. You can spend time with God in the shower. True. You can spend time with God at night before you go to sleep. True. But I tried all that and done all that, but the real fruit comes for me is that quiet time in the morning. If I get that quiet time, it's extremely productive, rewarding, encouraging, uplifting, and insightful. If I don't get that quiet time, nothing compares. It's the other time with God's good. I don't want to diminish that, but it's not the same. And so I just share that because I've met a lot of people that believe all those things I just said, and they believe that's a good relationship with God. Well, it's not a bad relationship, but it's not the best. And so, if you're listening to the podcast, I do want to encourage you, try the morning quiet time. For me, that's where the best is.
Yeah. What's the for you? What's the difference in that time? And as we look at abiding, is first of all, you're in the relationship, so it is 24/7, and you're following the Holy Spirit. There is a importance of abiding in the Word, which is what you're describing here. How do you differentiate abiding in the Word versus Bible study or devotion? Because a lot of people are doing this. Yeah, I have a quiet time, but it's not really abiding. So how do you help explain the difference?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you're right. A lot of people I know say, yeah, I have quiet time, and they read through the devotion. It's 1 or 2 pages. They're done in a few minutes. They close the book and they go on.
Right.
So the kind of where the Lord started preparing my heart for this abiding was I used to kind of almost speed read through the Bible, in my quiet time. And I'm a pretty fast reader, and so I've actually read through the Bible a couple of times. Check, I'm a very task-oriented person in that regard. Yeah. And so right around the time I met you, Rich, and maybe just before, the Lord really challenged me, slow down and read the Bible as slow as you can possibly read it. And I was starting the book of John. It took me almost a year to read the book of John.
Yeah.
Just to give you a contrast, instead of reading the whole Bible in a year, it took me almost right at a year to read the book of John. And so that's, for me, that's the big difference between doing a devotion or reading the Bible and abiding. So in that slowing down, I started to see nuances in the scripture I'd never seen before. I started to have an appreciation and understanding for verses that I'd read past before. The context became deeper and richer. The Lord started to speak to me and say, see what's happening here in this verse, or I could start to imagine myself, standing on Solomon's porch in the temple. And as I got later in the book, I could start to almost imagine what it was like standing there. And I started to have revelation and understanding of scripture that I'd seen all my life and never appreciated the shades of meaning that were there, and the revelation that was there. And the one that I remember, one of the more memorable times, and I can't do it justice today, but I'm reading this passage in John, and it's something happened on Solomon's porch, and Jesus is doing something, and there's basically three reports. The disciples who are telling the story, writing the book of John, tell it, from God's perspective and Jesus' perspective. But they also report what these two other parties are seeing, the religious leaders of the day, and how they're responding, and what they're seeing, and then what the common person is seeing, standing there and reporting what's happening from their perspective. And it just, the appreciation that I started to have for, here's God himself incarnate, and even people standing around him are getting three different stories from the same, watching the same person, and so how easily can we be misunderstood when we're trying to do the right thing for the right reasons, and just literally I sat and God unpacked that for days. Those couple of verses. And it was rich and meaningful, and rather than feeling accomplished that I checked the box, I walked away actually with a new paradigm.
And as you did that, even that example, what's the role of journaling in that? And then how do you receive that for your life, as opposed to, well, that's interesting. A lot of people know about the Bible and the stuff of the Bible, but they never actually receive it into their own life.
It's interesting that you mentioned journaling. Like I said, I grew up in church circles where that was actually encouraged, at least as a guest speaker would come in, or from time to time in a class or something. And I always thought, journaling, that girls fill out diaries. and so I never really paid it attention. And I heard on several occasions, you really should do this. And I would always just discount it. I'm too busy, or, whatever. And there's something about slowing down and writing it out, and writing out your thoughts, writing out the verse, as you teach, cross-referencing that to other verses, and asking the Lord, what do you have to say about this verse? Right. And how does that verse apply to me today? And just that whole exercise,
that's amazing.
Really does make it, the scripture says, don't be hearers, but doers. And so I liken that to a lot of people that do devotions and don't journal, just read the page and, say a quick prayer. And I've done that. I'm not knocking anybody. And that was my quiet time for the day. Well, that's not the same as slowing down and abiding and journaling and asking the Father, how does this verse apply to me? And looking at some of the cross references, and then pulling out the dictionary, and just really slowing down and soaking in the word. That starts to transform us into doers.
Absolutely. Christina, how about you? What does that look like for you?
Same. I hadn't nearly ever read a devotional and move on, and I check the box for the day. I'm not really a check the box kind of person, but that makes me feel good, so I'm done, for the day. And so just learning the abiding process and what that, it was just revelation. It became Rhema to me, because what happened was, it took something that I just understanding, breaking it down into layers, and just peeling back what the Lord's really trying to show you. And it just really was enlightening. And then I realized, even going through the abiding process, that it speaks to you in different seasons you're in. So I'm the first time we started doing this, our two girls were going off to college, and I thought my world had come to an end. And we did the abiding, and I just saw the Lord just being, I will take care of them, and I will, take care of my sheep, and just all these I wills in certain practices that we did, exercises. It was just amazing to see it. And so it grew me to be hungry for to do it again. And so when another season approached, I knew that abiding was the only way I'd get through that season. And that, and then journaling, I'm kind of, I'm free-spirited, like I mentioned. And so my journaling is probably in 5 different journals. The thought for the day might be in a journal that I did a while back. But what I found with journaling is that when I feel stuck, or I feel I come to a stop sign and I just don't know which way to go, if I reflect back to the journaling, I can see where God answered, and maybe there might be something there that's going to get me through the traffic light, get me back on focus, and not drift off so far.
It connects the dots, right? To go back and see what God was speaking when sometimes we feel like he's been quiet on something.
Right, exactly. So now that I'm just excited about that, because I've trained our daughters to do it. One is in particular is doing it. I've trained some editors, like, you just need to see this for yourself.
Yeah.
And so to go through the abiding process with a group of ladies or a group of couples, and then they see it just come alive.
Right.
It's just amazing to see God he really spoke to them, and they get in an emotional state at that moment because they never heard his voice before.
Right.
They never saw the rhema of the word before.
Yeah. And
so
actually, you both described this. You actually put a word to it. We've talked about this before, but you use the word rhema. What's the difference? You're in the word. What's the difference between rhema and Bible study?
It's huge. Putting it to words will be fun. So, Bible study, checking the box, you can walk away kind of feeling dry, quite honestly. Maybe you accomplished something spiritually. You did the thing you were supposed to do. You were a good Christian. And you're connected to God, and you got relationship, and you're going to heaven and all that. But it just kind of feels like there's a hole if you slow down and think about it. Like, something's missing in my life. When you walk away from God's word, and all of a sudden a verse that morning has come off the page, or you felt like God spoke personally to you, and you see there's such an excitement, such a joy, such a energy that I've had it where it literally changes days.
Yeah.
For days or weeks.
Yeah.
I feel different than I would if I just did a devotion.
Yeah.
And in my own life, I've not had rhema happen every day, but I've had it happen a lot, and it really changes the core. And often, for me at least, and I'm hoping this is other people's experience, it's course correcting, it's paradigm breaking.
Right.
It in some cases will change how I think the rest of my life.
Right.
So it's magnitudes of difference.
Yeah, I believe it goes from here to here.
Yeah.
I believe there's this transition that happens where you're reading the word and that all makes sense, and you can have an intellectual, just it makes sense, and you can debate something with someone, or you can actually tear apart the scripture and just get it at here. But when it becomes rhema, I think the Holy Spirit comes upon you, and it just was like, this is what I've been saying. This is where I wanted you to go with this.
Right.
And it becomes an enlightening moment where it just opens our eyes to a different level of God. And it's not really for everybody else in the room. It's just for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And Jesus is, the way we describe it is, which you've said so beautifully, is Jesus's words, he says, which I'm speaking to you, become spirit and life. That now you're a receiver of what I'm going to do in you and through you. Like you said, Joel, it alters your whole life because I'm guiding you into who I am and want you to live out. So that's the difference between rhema and Bible study. So thank you for sharing that. And as you've set the stage, I know that based upon that, then you have the process available to discern God's will. And talk to us about how does that work? How does unity come about? And give us some examples of decisions you had to make or issues you had to resolve that you instead of you deciding it, you received God's will about it.
Well, we have hundreds of stories, but we've narrowed it down to 2 or 3 that we'd like to share if we have time. The first was really kind of when we were introduced to you, Rich, and the whole abiding process was probably 3 years ago now, 3-ish.
Yeah. Let me just interject here. Joel and I remember the dating part, I'm the free spirit. He's the person that's deep personality.
Go make
control.
It happen. Joel's the guy that's going to go make it happen.
Yes. So there's these moments in time that we don't see eye to eye in a lot of things. And so unity was not something that we did well.
I'm the oldest and she's the only.
And so I'm like, unity, man, that was quite and usually unity looked like, yes, whatever you want to do. And that's where we would go with that. So I just wanted to make sure you understood.
The scripture, don't let the sun go down on your wrath.
Oh man.
So we decided that just means we fight till 3 or 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Because we want to get this over with.
So unity was quite a hard situation situation to come to a lot of times.
But the good news is we only ever fought 3 times in our whole married life.
Yeah, morning, noon, and night.
Yeah.
So they're, this is just
good.
kind of giving you a background on coming to unity and how this is a miracle of God, actually.
For us to come to unity, that's huge.
Yeah.
But the first abiding retreat we went to, Steve and Carolyn Van Odegum were putting it on.
Yeah.
And they invited
we
us
just
out.
had them on last week, by the way.
Oh, they're so awesome. They're some of our favorite people.
Yeah, we love them.
They're good friends now. But we got to know them mostly through that first abiding retreat that they were hosting. And so we got exposed to the abiding process and coming into unity, and we'll talk about that in a second. But that was one of those Rhema things for us, Rich, especially the passage you share in Acts where the apostles, there's some disagreement among the early church about whether the new converts, the Gentiles, should be circumcised or not, and there's great debate, right? And,
no small dispute, as
no small says, right?
You could relate to that, huh?
Yeah. So we're like, woo, these are our kind of people.
Yeah.
But anyway, so and then what really almost crushed me, and I think it really attacked some pride in my life, was getting to that next few verses where it says, and they went on their way to Jerusalem, spreading great joy about the work the Lord had been doing. Right. And I thought, there's no way Christina and I've been spreading great joy when we're debating.
Yeah.
When we're not in unity, everybody knows. It's like,
so that idea that God had a different way to process disagreement was, and again, we've been around a lot of great teaching. I'd grown up in church, Spirit-filled, Bible-believing churches, but I'd never heard something like that you could actually be in disagreement and in unity at the same time.
Right.
And so it was fascinating. It was Raymond. And so at the time, we had been, our first abiding retreat that we attended, we were trying to decide what our next home was going to be. I wanted to go smaller. She wanted to go bigger. We were exact opposite ends of the spectrum. And so we decided to process that, in one of the breakout in the afternoon as kind of our homework. And we were still, totally in opposite directions, but we processed the truth that was in our hearts, like you show in the curriculum. And we went through that process and got to the end of it. And for the first time, we stopped and said, Father, we're obviously in disagreement, but we want your will, not ours.
Yeah.
So
beautiful.
We both surrender our will.
Yeah.
Right. And we know that you're a good God. You've proven to us over and over and over that you're a good Father and that you give us good things. And you know what's best for us. You designed us. You know what the future holds. So we're going to leave this in your hands and let you help us figure out what to do for the next house. Guys, it was almost 2.5 years. We walked in total unity on that, in total disagreement.
Yeah.
Wow.
It wasn't an overnight situation. It was a 2.5 year journey with each other.
And so part of that story is when we moved into this house, we were just coming back to San Antonio. It's just getting C12 off the ground. And so we decided we'd lease. And I told the owner when we walked in, I had heard he had it up for sale. And I said, well, if you ever decide to sell it, I want to buy it. I want first dibs. And so a year into the contract, he said, hey, would you like to buy the house? I said, sure. He goes, great. I want top of the market. I was like, no, we've lived in it for a year. I'd be willing to offer you something less than top of the market.
Yeah, we knew what was going on.
There was a couple of little challenges. It was only 10 years old, but had a couple of things. And so we couldn't come to agreement. So we extended the lease another year. The end of the second year, he says, hey, y'all want to buy the house? So we said, sure. We started the negotiations. He ran to the top of the market. I wanted something less. And we were coming up on the end of the third year, and that's when we went to the abiding retreat, because we were going to have to make a decision. And so we put it in God's hand at the abiding retreat, and every time it'd come up, we just left it. We'd go back to neutral. Like, look, whatever God wants, that's what we want.
Yeah.
And so Months go by, we're sitting at Valentine's dinner, 2019, and an email comes in on my phone, and it's the owner, says, "Yeah, I want to buy the house."
And we're like,
And I'm like, "Not this again." I mean, we're done with this.
We've already said yes.
We're just going to go somewhere else.
We'll
We
do
give it up
something
on this,
else.
And so we sat there, and almost my first response was, no, I'm not gonna. You've jumped through your hoops before. I'm not gonna play this game. Just no. And Christina's like, no. And then we sat there for a minute, and we go, wait a second.
Yeah.
What if this is God?
We heard the abiding coming back. Hey, we're like, whoa.
We're like, okay, let's not just say no. Okay, Father, what do you have to say about this?
Yeah.
And we're sitting at Valentine's dinner, and we both have this sense. Well, just go ahead and see what he has to say. And I think Christina and I said, well, Rich always says, get the data. All right. We'll get the data. And so I emailed him back, and I said, yes, we've always been interested in that house, but it depends on where the negotiation starts. And I hit send. And he replies a couple hours later toward the end of the night, and he said, we'll start negotiations at the lowest price you offered previously.
2 years ago.
Whoa.
Wow.
Yeah.
And he goes, but we're not paying any closing, and we're not paying any repairs.
We're like, okay.
It's like, okay. So we start the process with them. We go ahead and get the inspection. We go back and say, would you guys be open to paying half the closing and half the inspection? Now, they said adamantly no in the email before. They came back and said, okay. And during this process, we're just, constantly checking in with the Father.
Right.
And we agreed at Valentine's, actually that night.
Yeah.
We said, if we're going to do this, we're only going to do this if it's God. And the moment that joy or peace leaves, we're out.
Right.
What we've got.
That's great.
What we have, what the Lord's done in our hearts and in our marriage and our relationship the last couple of years is not worth a house. And so we said, there's no way if this goes sideways, even for a day, we're out.
Yeah. It's not that complicated, is it?
No,
really.
We've made it complicated in the past, but this particular time we chose to put our wheels on the back burner.
And so we long story made short, they ended up paying half the closing, half the repairs. We closed in 3.5 weeks or something.
We closed real quick.
They only one time did we get a little tense with each other for 2 minutes, and we looked at each other and said, does this mean the house is off? Have we lost our joy? Are we walking away? And we both paused for a minute, and we searched our hearts. We got quiet, and we came back together and said, no, that was just whatever that was. We're good. And we bought a house arguing less over that house than we have on the right way to hang toilet paper
or make a bed.
So we're ready to close. We've got peace about the whole thing, except we don't have the cash for closing.
We're like, now what do we do?
And every time we ask the Father in our quiet time and as we're abiding, God, do we go ahead? Because we don't have the cash.
Right.
And he's like, go ahead. And,
kind of a slight important thing.
Yeah.
And we're like, but we had total, you guys have experienced this, I know.
Yeah.
But you have total peace, total confidence, total assurance, no doubt, and that God was going to take care of it. And he just said, keep going forward. And so every couple of little things came up here and there, and he's like, just keep going forward. So Tuesday before we close on Friday, our CPA calls and says, we've rerun all your numbers. This is now April.
Because it's around tax time.
Right.
So we're self-employed. So we have to stash money for taxes, of course. And so we've done that. So so she's doing our taxes.
We've paid in our quarterlies.
Everything's good.
And so she calls and she goes, well, I've got good news. Something the Trump administration passed, kicked in, you guys qualify for. There's an extra $10,000 credit we didn't put in our calculations. And so actually, you don't have to send in any more money. And you're going to get a little bit back.
And we're like,
so we hang up the phone. And that afternoon or the next day, I think it's the next day, the title company calls and says, here's your preliminary closing amount. It may shift a few dollars, but you're in the ballpark with this number. That number was within $100 of what we had in our savings account to pay our taxes.
Oh my gosh.
So we were able to just go pay it with no problem, no stress, no regrets. It just happened. Wow. And so we were like, thank the Lord, because we didn't know what else to do.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful testament, though, of really waiting on him, allowing him, you think about your over 2-year wait, even in the negotiations, where he was working both sides of the equation,
right,
and working in the heart of the owner, and then just moving all these different pieces, and then your ability to stay in unity and walk in faith and just trust what he was saying, regardless of what you were seeing.
right.
It's a beautiful example of abiding.
Yeah, beautiful.
And I do want to say, for the record, the couple had bought the house in 2008 at the bottom of the market. So they walked away with a lot of cash.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We walked into it below market, so we had equity.
So it was a win-win.
Yeah,
it was a win-win for both.
That's beautiful.
Well, we have a little bit more time. We got time for maybe one more example. So Christina, you said you had a.
Can I share one?
Yeah, you bet.
It's like a 5-second testimony. So I asked God if I could get a Cybertruck. I abided on it for a few days. He said no.
He said no.
And so you didn't go buy it then, huh, Joel?
No, and I'm totally cool with that. So I'm sure he's got another vehicle in mind. And I trust him.
Right.
So just really quick on the abiding, learning to abide and asking the Lord. I was raised, my dad did janitorial commercial, and I was raised in that atmosphere. That's all I ever knew, is be entrepreneur and janitorial service and stuff like that. So when Joel and I hit some low moments early, I was not low moments in our finances, I would say, let me start a business. I can do this. And he'd be like, not right now, not right now. We'd all kind of went back and forth with not yet, not good timing. And so I learned to do the abiding process. And so I was about to pull a trigger right before my mom.
The beginning of this year.
Beginning of this year. Yes, beginning of this year. And then my mom went into hospice care, and that took a lot of my time and energy. And I just hadn't had time to start a business or anything like that. So I stick with what I had in motion, was just real estate and chaplain, and then caring for mom. So I started doing the abiding, and then I was about to launch right after she passed, I believe, or right before she passed. Anyway, so and the Lord said, not now.
Well, I asked her, I said, have you asked the Father?
Yeah, that's what it was. He asked me, have you asked the Father? I was like, oh, no, I haven't.
Whoops.
So I slowed down, right. I slowed down and said, hold on. And so he's like, not right now. And then Joel says, did he say not at all? I said, no, he didn't say not at all. He said, not right now. So that time allowed me to focus on mom and to transition my mom into where she's at now and with the Father. And life has happened, things have gone on. And then just the other day, we got back from our couples retreat, and I heard the Lord bring back a desire of my heart. Because you know how you say into, what's your desires? And so I'm like, well, I remember I have a desire to start a cleaning service for commercial and homes and stuff like that. And so he's like, well, let's get, so I gathered information, started putting things together. So lo and behold, I ended up starting the business 2 weeks ago, and I have about a dozen clients now. So God has just accelerated that a lot faster than if I had done it like out of his timing, I believe. So that's just me abiding and learning to be quiet and wait upon him for the right timing to do something. And so it's not like I didn't get a no, it's just the timing was the situation.
Have you had any difficulty finding labor to do the work?
Labor? I have about 3 or 4 ladies that are working for me now. One's actually so I've had
that's the cool thing, Rich, is when it's in God's timing, all the resources come together.
Yeah.
And it's not been stressed.
Oh, that's good.
It's not taking a lot of her time.
No, right now it's just managing it and talking to the customer clients. And so at this moment, it's pretty manageable, and God's just got it under control. So it's good.
That's great. Have you, by the way, have you talked to Lillian Radke?
I was just thinking the same thing.
Oh.
You need to connect with Lillian.
She's a C12 leader or member. She had a business, started a business out of the East Coast with Rick Ferris. And then she bought a business down in Florida. And so she's got 2 big operations in exactly what you're doing. Now
essentially, she's kind of running the East Coast now. She's expanded it to go between the 2.
Wow.
So we could connect you with her.
Yeah,
and
love to connect.
She's gone through it at all, and she's got we should have her on, by the way, Kathy.
They're a great couple.
She's got a great testimony of she just bought this business, and she went through kind of what you just said, Joel, is, well, let's go ask God. And God kept saying, nope, nope, not yet. No, don't do it that way. No, don't agree to that. Stay with it, and I think they were almost a 2-year deal for them to finally, the guy finally, like your house, like, okay, you know what, well, let's do it this way. And God said, now's the time, and so what a beautiful example. And I know we'll have to have them back on because they got a few more stories that they could share of the beauty. And we can see your enthusiasm and the beauty. Even what you said is you could leave something really lay there for a couple years. Always understanding, this is what I know you have absorbed, is, well, God's will is best and none better. Why wouldn't you just wait? Even if it takes that long, because of the timing, and now the timing of your business, and that'll be a thrill to see how that develops. And I know, Joel, you got a few things that you're biting on about some interesting things you're doing. So we got to have them back and share these fabulous stories. So.
Right. What I also think is fun for listeners who know, Rich and I were talking last week about, Rich was leading a retreat the same weekend that Dan and I were leading a retreat. Actually, the same weekend that Joel and Christina were leading a retreat.
That's right.
Once you learn abiding, you can't help but want to give it away.
Right.
Oh, exactly.
It is such a life-changing thing to really learn how to have that intimacy with God. And you guys are a great testament to that. So
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. We love you guys so much, and we're excited what you're doing. We'll have you back and share the next phase of all this, and see what else God has to say. But thank you for clarifying so well. And the beauty of how it works is, well, why wouldn't you do that? And live that way. So we love you guys. And Kathy, we'll pick it up again tomorrow. We got End Times Friday. We're talking about lots of cool stuff with that as we are moving, have been and talking about rapture and
we're getting to some really interesting stuff.
Some interesting stuff. So we'll process that. So
absolutely.
Kathy,
It was great to have everybody with us. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks for joining us, Joel and Christina. And we'll talk to you guys soon.
Yeah. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Come and See, your podcast for truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. Send us your questions and comments, and tune in tomorrow for more answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. Remember, God's will is best and none better. His truth brings peace in this world of chaos.